The crystal towers of Vellani Prime burned against the purple sky. Deho watched from the High Council chamber as another section of the city fell to the swarm. The creatures moved like a black wave across the glowing structures, eating everything in their path. "How many ships do we have left?" Deho asked without turning from the window. Hyunwoo checked his crystal display. The military commander's face was grim. 12 defense ships, sir. Maybe 8 that can still fight." Deho closed his eyes. 3 months ago, they had 300 ships protecting their home system. The hive had destroyed them all. Now the creatures were on the surface, turning their beautiful world into food. "The other colonies?" Deho asked, though he already knew the answer. Vellani 2nd fell yesterday. Vellani 3rd has maybe 6 hours before the swarm reaches their main cities. Hyunwoo paused. "We are the last, sir." The council chamber was quiet except for the distant sound of destruction. The other council members sat in their crystal chairs, their bodies dim with fear. When Vellani were afraid, their natural glow faded. Right now, the room was almost dark. Yuna, their communications officer, spoke up. Her voice was soft, like music made of glass. "There is one option we have not tried." All eyes turned to her. Yuna was young for a council member, but she was the best at working with their quantum communication systems. "The emergency beacon," she continued. "We could send a distress call across the galaxy." Deho shook his head. "The old laws forbid it. Random signals bring random responses. We could call something worse than the hive." "What could be worse than this?" Hyunwoo pointed toward the window where another crystal spire collapsed. Black creatures swarmed over its remains. The hive was unlike anything they had ever faced. The creatures were part machine, part living tissue. They consumed everything organic and turned it into more of themselves. Planets became empty rocks after they passed. Entire species became extinct in weeks. Yuna stood up. Her crystal body sparkled with nervous energy. "I have studied the old records. The beacon was used 3 times in our history. Twice help came. Good species answered and saved lives. And the 3rd time?" asked another council member. Yuna was quiet for a moment. "The 3rd time, no one answered at all." Deho looked around the room. These were the last leaders of his people. In a few hours, they would be dead. Their entire civilization would be gone, eaten by creatures that cared nothing for beauty or art, or the songs their crystals sang in harmony. "Show me the beacon system," he said. They went down into the deep levels of the council building. Here, ancient machines hummed with power. The beacon was older than their current civilization. It was built by their ancestors who feared exactly this kind of disaster. Yuna led them to a chamber filled with massive crystals. Each one was connected to quantum transmitters that could send signals across impossible distances. The system could reach every corner of the galaxy in minutes. "We will offer our harmonic crystals," Yuna explained as she prepared the system. "They are the only thing we have that other species want. Our crystals can power faster than light communication, better than anything else in the galaxy. Will anyone care enough to help?" Deho asked. Yuna did not answer. She did not know. The beacon came online with a deep musical note. The crystals began to glow brighter and brighter. Soon the room was filled with pure light. "Beginning transmission," Yuna announced. She had spent hours writing the message. It was simple and honest. They told the galaxy who they were, what was happening to them, and what they could offer in return for help. The message included pictures of their dying worlds and data about the hive threat. "People of the galaxy," the message began. "We are the Vellani of the Outer Spiral. We are a peaceful species facing extinction. The creatures called the hive are consuming our worlds. Our cities are falling. Our people are dying. We offer our most precious resource, harmonic crystals, to any species willing to help us. Please, we do not want to die." The transmission went out in all directions. It would reach thousands of worlds, hundreds of different species. Someone would care. Someone had to care. Now they waited. The first responses came quickly. The Ethereal Confederation received the signal within an hour. Their answer was cold and businesslike. "Request evaluated. Cost exceeds benefit. Declined." The Machine Collective responded next. "Probability of success, 12%. Resource expenditure not justified, negative." More rejections came. The Psionic Assembly ignored them completely. The Trade Federation offered to buy their crystals but would not send military help. One by one, every major galactic power said no. Deho felt his light growing dimmer. Around him, the other council members were losing hope. Some had already stopped glowing entirely. "Maybe we asked for too much," Hyunwoo said. Maybe we should have offered more crystals. We offered everything we have, Yuna replied. She was still monitoring the communication array, hoping for good news. Outside, the sounds of destruction grew louder. The hive had reached the government district. Soon they would break into the council building itself. Then Yuna's crystals chimed with a new signal. Her eyes went wide. Someone answered, she whispered. Who? Deho rushed to her side. Yuna's hands shook as she decoded the message. The signal was strong, coming from a small system in what most species considered an empty part of the galaxy. The signal says, message received. Help is coming. Terra. The room was silent. Then Hyunwoo laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Terra? The humans? He shook his head. That is not help. That is something much worse. Deho had heard stories about humans. Every species in the galaxy had. They were the nightmare that parents used to scare children into behaving. Humans were the species that turned diplomacy into war, exploration into conquest, and peace into ashes. We cannot accept help from them, another council member said. Humans are monsters. Are they worse than the hive? Yuna asked quietly. Before anyone could answer, the building shook. Something massive had hit the outer wall. Through the quantum communication system, they could hear reports from across the city. The hive creatures had reached the council building. Decision time, Deho said. He looked at each council member. We can face the hive alone and die with honor. Or we can accept human help and live to regret it. Another impact shook the building. This time they heard the sound of crystal walls breaking. I choose to live, Yuna said. She turned back to the communication array. I am sending our location and tactical data to the human fleet. Wait, Deho started to say, but it was too late. The message was already sent. Somewhere in the galaxy, humans had received detailed information about their worlds, their defenses, and their desperate situation. What have we done? Hyunwoo whispered. Through the communication system, they heard a new message in return. The voice was human, speaking their language with a strange accent. Hold your positions. Estimated arrival 18 hours. Do not surrender to the hive. Repeat, do not surrender. We are coming, the transmission ended. The room was quiet again except for the sounds of the hive breaking through their defenses. Deho looked at his people. They had called for help and received an answer. But now he wondered if they had simply traded one form of death for another. The humans were coming. And everyone in the galaxy knew what that meant. News of humanity's response spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours, every major species knew that humans were mobilizing for war. Emergency meetings began on a dozen worlds. Admiral Ginny stood in the command center of the Terran Defense Station, watching as her fleet prepared for departure. Ships that had been scattered across human space were now gathering at the rally point near Earth's moon. Each vessel was a masterpiece of destructive engineering. Status report, Ginny called to her staff. Captain Tae-hyung stepped forward. He commanded the dreadnought Indomitable Spirit, the flagship of the human fleet. 47 ships ready for hyperspace jump, Admiral. More are coming from the outer colonies, Jin-A nodded. She was a small woman with gray hair, but her eyes held the hardness of someone who had seen too much war. What about the hive intelligence? Dr. So-min approached with her datapad. As the fleet's chief scientist, she had spent years studying every alien threat in the galaxy. The hive is worse than we thought, Admiral. They have consumed 12 star systems in 3 months. The Vellani are the first species to survive their initial contact. How did they manage that? Their crystal cities reflect energy weapons. The hive had to adapt their tactics, which bought the Vellani time. So-min brought up holographic displays showing the alien creatures. But they are learning. Each attack is more effective than the last. Jin-A studied the images. The hive creatures looked like nightmares made real. They were part insect, part machine, with sharp claws and metal implants. They moved in perfect coordination like parts of a single mind. Recommendations? Colonel Wu Jin spoke up from across the room. He led the marine forces that would board enemy ships and fight on planetary surfaces. Hit them fast and hard before they can adapt to us. These things learn from every battle. Give them time and they will find ways to counter our weapons. Agreed, Jin-A said. She turned to address the entire command staff. This is not a rescue mission. This is war. The hive must be completely destroyed. Not defeated. Not driven away. Wiped out. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other species watched humanity's preparations with terror. On the ethereal homeworld, the High Council met in emergency session. Their leader, a being of pure energy, spoke in worried tones. The humans are moving in force. Intelligence reports at least 50 warships. Why do they care about the Villani? Another council member asked. Humans have never shown interest in crystal beings before. It does not matter why. What matters is that they are mobilizing. Remember Proxima Station? The room fell silent. Every species remembered Proxima Station. It had been a neutral trading post where a human diplomat was killed during negotiations. The humans had declared it an act of war. Within a week, they had destroyed the station, the attacking species' homeworld, and every colony ship trying to escape. 3 billion beings died. The humans called it proportional response. On the machine collective's core world, artificial intelligences calculated probability scenarios. Their results were disturbing. Human fleet composition suggests total war parameters, one AI announced. This exceeds normal human response patterns. Query: what makes the Villani situation different? Analysis suggests humans view the hive as existential threat. Previous encounters in Kepler sector resulted in 67% human casualties before victory. Conclusion: humans are not responding to Villani distress call. They are responding to hive expansion threat. Back at the human rally point, more ships arrived every hour. The fleet grew from 47 vessels to 63, then to 81. Each ship that arrived made the other species more nervous. Captain Tae-hyung walked through his ship's corridors checking preparations. The indomitable Spirit was 3 kilometers long and carried enough weapons to destroy continents. Its crew of 5,000 was preparing for the kind of battle that would be remembered for centuries. In the armory, Marines cleaned weapons that most species had banned from warfare. In the medical bay, doctors prepared for casualties from enemy weapons that dissolved organic matter. In engineering, technicians calibrated systems that could tear holes in space itself. Captain, his first officer approached. We are receiving worried transmissions from other species. They want to know our intentions. Tae-hyung did not look up from his tactical displays. Our intentions are simple. We will help the Villani, and we will destroy the hive. Sir, the Galactic Council is requesting that we limit our response. They fear our methods will violate warfare conventions. Now Tae-hyung looked up. His expression was cold. The same conventions that prevented them from helping the Villani? Tell the Council that humans do not recognize limitations when fighting for survival. Dr. Somin finished her briefings to the ship commanders. She had shared everything humanity knew about the hive. The creatures had first appeared in the Kepler sector 5 years ago. A human colony world had been their target. The battle for Kepler Prime had lasted 3 weeks. Humans had used every weapon they possessed, including several that they had sworn never to use again. In the end, they won, but barely. 60,000 colonists died. An entire marine division was wiped out. But humans learned from that victory. They studied captured hive creatures, analyzed their tactics, and developed countermeasures. If they faced the hive again, they would be ready. Admiral, Tae-hyung reported. All ships ready for departure. Jin-A looked at the tactical display showing her assembled fleet. 93 ships, each one designed for maximum destruction. It was the largest human fleet assembled since the Titan War. Begin hyperspace jump sequence, she ordered. As the fleet prepared to jump, emergency broadcasts went out across the galaxy. The Psionic Assembly issued warnings to all member species. The Trade Federation suspended all commerce in the target region. Even the normally confident machine collective began moving their assets away from human space. One transmission reached the Villani communication systems. It was from the Ethereal Confederation. Warning to Villani survivors. Human fleet approaching your location. Recommend immediate evacuation of all civilian populations. Human warfare tactics are indiscriminate. Repeat. Evacuate immediately. Daeho received this message in the ruins of the council chamber. Half the building had collapsed under hive attacks. Most of his people were dead or missing. Those who remained had taken shelter in the deep crystal caves beneath the city. They warn us about the humans, he told Yuna. Should we try to evacuate? Yuna looked at the tactical displays. Hive creatures covered 80% of their world's surface. Their remaining ships could carry maybe 1,000 people. 50 million Villani lived in the underground shelters. Evacuate to where? She asked. The hive controls everything except these caves. If we leave, we die. If we stay, maybe the humans can help us. Or maybe the humans will kill us themselves. Maybe, Yuna agreed. But the hive will definitely kill us. Above them, through the rock and crystal, they could hear the sounds of battle. Their last 12 defense ships were still fighting. But everyone knew it was hopeless. They were buying time for the civilians, nothing more. Yunwu approached with a communication device. I have been monitoring hive transmissions. They are disturbed by something. What do you mean? Their coordination is changing. They are receiving new orders, pulling forces from other worlds. It is as if something has frightened them. Deho felt a small spark of hope. The humans? The human fleet has not arrived yet. But maybe the hive has fought them before. Maybe they remember. Through their quantum communication system, they received one more message from the human fleet. Valani Command. This is Admiral Jinne of the Terran Fleet. We will arrive in your system in 4 hours. Prepare all remaining forces for coordinated assault. Tag your positions with quantum beacons. Anything not tagged will be considered hostile. Hold your ground. Help is coming. The transmission ended with something that sounded almost like kindness. You are not alone anymore. 4 hours until the humans arrived. 4 hours until they learned whether salvation came with teeth and claws, or with something even worse. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like death itself coming to call. Seong-ho watched from his hiding place in the crystal caves as the sky above Valani Prime filled with ships that should not exist. Each human vessel was massive, dark, and covered with weapons that made no sense. Energy readings spiked beyond anything their sensors could measure. Some ships seemed to bend light around themselves. Others appeared to flicker in and out of reality. How many? Whispered another Valani survivor huddled beside him. Seong-ho counted the contacts on their emergency scanner. 112 ships, no. More are still arriving. The hive creatures on the surface had stopped their systematic destruction. For the first time since the invasion began, they showed something that looked like confusion. Their perfect coordination wavered. In space, the first contact between humans and hive was brief and violent. 3 hive bioships approached the human fleet to investigate. The lead human dreadnought fired once. All 3 alien vessels simply disappeared in a flash of light that hurt to look at. My God, Seong-ho breathed. What kind of weapon was that? The question was answered moments later when more hive ships arrived. This time dozens of them, the largest bio-vessels in their swarm. The humans did not wait for them to attack. Fighter craft launched from the human ships like angry insects. But these were not ordinary fighters. They moved in ways that ignored physics, turning at impossible angles, accelerating beyond what any living pilot could survive. Mi Young led the first fighter squadron toward the hive formation. She had trained for this moment for 3 years, ever since humanity's first encounter with these creatures. Her fighter was more than a machine. It was connected to her thoughts, responding to her intentions as much as her controls. All units, remember your briefing, she spoke into her communication system. These things learn fast. Do not give them time to adapt. Hit everything that moves. The human fighters struck the hive bioships like a storm of metal and energy. But it was not just their weapons that were terrifying. It was how they fought. Mi Young's fighter predicted where a hive vessel would move before it started moving. When bioships tried to coordinate their attacks, human weapons disrupted their communication somehow. When hive creatures attempted their standard boarding tactics, they found human ships ready with defenses that seemed custom-built to counter them. How do they know our tactics? The thought came from Dongmin, a part of the hive collective consciousness. For the first time in its existence, the collective felt something it did not understand. Fear. The humans had fought the hive before. That much was clear. But this was more than experience. The humans had studied them, learned from them, and prepared specifically for this battle. As the space battle raged, human ships moved into position around Valani Prime, but they did not begin a planetary bombardment as everyone expected. Instead, they sent a communication to the Valani survivors. Attention, Valani Command. We are beginning surface operations. Mark all civilian locations with quantum tags immediately. Anything unmarked will be treated as hostile. Yuna worked frantically with their emergency communication systems. She sent the locations of every shelter, every group of survivors, every place where Valani might be hiding. The humans acknowledged each transmission with cold efficiency. Then the real nightmare began. The humans did not drop bombs or fire energy weapons at the planet's surface. Instead, they sent down pods that crashed into the ground like meteorites. From each pod emerged squads of human soldiers, but these were not ordinary soldiers. They wore armor that moved like living skin. Their weapons fired projectiles that seemed to track their targets through solid rock. Most disturbing of all, they worked with captured hive creatures. Xiang-Ho watched in horror as human soldiers directed biomechanical monsters against their own kind. The humans had somehow turned hive creatures into weapons, breaking their connection to the collective and reprogramming them for human use. "This is impossible," he whispered. "How can they control those things?" The answer came from Hei-Wan, a human specialist in psychological warfare. She sat in a command center aboard the Indomitable Spirit, coordinating the most disturbing aspect of the human assault. "Broadcast. Package 7 on all high frequencies," she ordered her team. Package 7 contained recordings from humanity's previous encounters with the hive. But these were not battle recordings. They were documentation of what humans did to captured hive specimens. The images showed biological horrors that even the hive collective found difficult to process. Humans did not just kill their enemies. They studied them, understood them, and then used that knowledge to break them in ways that went beyond physical destruction. Within minutes of the broadcast, hive creatures across the planet began retreating from positions they had held for months. The collective consciousness was experiencing something unprecedented: psychological trauma. "Continue broadcasting," Hei-Wan ordered. "Target their communication nodes with Package 12. Package 12 was worse. It showed what humans had done to hive command organisms in the Kepler sector. The creatures had been kept alive while human scientists learned how their collective consciousness worked. Then they had used that knowledge to create weapons that attacked the hive's mind directly. On the planet's surface, the hive retreat became a rout. Creatures that had never known defeat began fleeing toward their bioships. But the humans had prepared for this too. Mi Young's fighters had moved into position around the planet's escape routes. As hive vessels tried to flee, they found themselves flying into carefully laid traps. Human ships herded them like animals toward kill zones where the entire fleet waited. "This is not warfare," Dongmin thought desperately. "This is extermination." The collective was right. Humans were not trying to defeat the hive. They were trying to wipe them out completely. Every tactical decision, every weapon choice, every strategic move was designed to ensure that no hive creature escaped to threaten another world. But the most disturbing discovery came when some hive creatures tried to surrender. Through quantum transmissions, they sent messages indicating their desire to stop fighting. The humans ignored them. Colonel Wu Jin, leading the ground assault, received multiple surrender offers from hive subcommanders. His response was always the same: surrender not accepted. Continue the mission. It was not cruelty. It was something worse than cruelty. It was the cold calculation that the hive could not be allowed to survive anywhere in the galaxy. As the battle continued, Sung-Ho and the other Villani survivors began to understand what they had called down upon their world. The humans were not just saving them from the hive. They were demonstrating why every species in the galaxy feared them. The human fleet was not operating under rules of war or codes of honor. They were operating under a simple principle: total elimination of the threat regardless of cost or consequence. "Are we next?" asked another survivor. "After they finish with the hive, will they turn on us?" Xiang-Ho did not answer. He could not answer, because as he watched human soldiers moving through the ruins of his city, he realized something terrifying. The humans were winning. In 6 hours, they had turned a hopeless battle into a complete victory. The hive swarm that had conquered 12 star systems was being systematically destroyed by a species that fought like demons and planned like gods. But victory always came with a price. And Sung-Ho was beginning to understand that they might have traded one form of extinction for another. The humans had come to help them. The question now was whether they would survive that help. 3 days after the human fleet arrived, Yunji finally gained access to their command frequencies. As the Villani's chief scientist, she had been working non-stop to understand how their saviors operated. What she discovered made her question everything she thought she knew about right and wrong. The humans were not just killing the hive. They were systematically destroying the biological and psychological foundations that made the creatures what they were. Their weapons did not simply cause death, They caused corruption, turning the hive's own biology against them. Yunji watched in fascination and horror as human weapons infected hive bioships with modified viruses. The ships began growing tumors that produced human pheromones. These chemical signals confused the creatures, making them attack their own kind. "How is this possible?" she whispered to herself as she studied the data. But that was not the most disturbing discovery. In the refugee camps that humans had established, Yunji witnessed something that broke her understanding of their species entirely. A human medic named Jun-Ho worked tirelessly among Vellani survivors. He had been treating patients for 18 hours straight without rest. His medical supplies, precious resources in a war zone, were freely shared with anyone who needed them, regardless of species. Yunji watched him comfort a young Vellani child whose harmonic crystals had been damaged by trauma. The child could no longer communicate properly with other Vellani. Jun-Ho sat with her for hours, learning basic crystal harmonics so he could speak to her in her own language. "You are safe now," he told the child in broken but understandable Vellani. "The bad things cannot hurt you anymore." This was the same species that had just finished broadcasting psychological torture to break an entire alien collective consciousness. The same humans who refused to accept surrender from defeated enemies were now sacrificing their own resources to heal the wounded. Yunji struggled to understand how such contradictions could exist in one species. Her confusion deepened when she intercepted a transmission from a hive subcollective. The creature, calling itself Chanwu, was attempting to communicate with Vellani translators. "Please," the message said in broken galactic standard, "we do not want to fight anymore. We only consume because we must. We flee from something worse." Yunji brought this message to the human command center. She found Admiral Jin'e studying tactical displays with her senior staff. "Admiral," Yunji said carefully, "we have received a communication from the hive. They claim they want to surrender." Jin'e looked up from her displays. Her expression was unreadable. "Surrender is not possible, but they say they were fleeing from something, that they only consume worlds to survive." "Dr. Yunji," Jin'e said quietly, "in the past month, the hive has consumed the populations of 12 worlds. Billions of beings are dead. They were not fleeing when they destroyed your colonies. They were expanding. But what if they are telling the truth now? What if we can find another solution?" Jin'e gestured to her tactical displays. They showed the systematic destruction of hive bioships throughout the system. There is only one solution that ensures they never threaten innocent beings again. Yunji felt her crystal structure dim with sadness. "You mean extermination?" "I mean protection," Jin'e corrected. "Protection for every species in this galaxy who cannot protect themselves." The conversation was interrupted by Commander Nari, who led the human ground forces. She had been fighting hive creatures on the planet's surface for 3 days and looked exhausted. "Admiral, we have a problem," Nari said. "Some of the hive creatures we captured, they are not what we expected." "Explain." Nari activated a holographic display showing several captured hive specimens. But these creatures looked different from the others. They were smaller, less mechanical, and showed signs of intelligence that went beyond collective programming. "These appear to be individuals," Nari continued. "They have separate consciousnesses. They remember lives before joining the hive collective. Some were assimilated from other species." The implications hit Yunji immediately. "You mean the hive does not just consume other beings? They convert them." "It gets worse," Nari said. "Some of these individuals were converted against their will. They retain memories of their original lives, their families, their homes." Jin'e was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that Yunji had never heard before. "How many of the creatures we have captured?" "About 30% show signs of individual consciousness. The rest are true collective beings born into the hive structure." Yunji felt the moral complexity of the situation crushing down on her. The humans were not just fighting mindless monsters. They were fighting a mix of creatures, some of whom were victims themselves. "What do we do with this information?" she asked. Jin'e looked at her tactical displays again. The systematic destruction of the hive was proceeding exactly as planned. In a few more hours, every creature in the system would be dead. "We make an impossible choice," Jin'e said finally. "We can try to separate the individuals from the collective, attempt rehabilitation, and risk allowing the hive to escape and threaten other worlds. Or we can complete the extermination and accept that we are killing innocent victims along with the aggressors. The command center was silent. This was the kind of decision that other species could not make. It required a willingness to bear moral weight that would crush most civilizations. Yunji understood now why humanity was feared. Not because they were evil, but because they were willing to make choices that broke other beings' minds. They would accept the responsibility for genocide if it meant protecting the innocent. "There is a third option," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Chan Wu, the Hive subcollective, being escorted by human guards. The creature had somehow learned to operate a translation device and was speaking directly to them. "You can let us try," Chan Wu continued. "Some of us. We remember who we were before. We can help separate the individuals from the collective. We can find another way." Ginny studied the creature carefully. "And what guarantee do we have that this is not a trick? That you will not simply regroup and continue consuming worlds?" "You have no guarantee," Chan Wu admitted. "But you humans, you understand sacrifice, yes? We offer to sacrifice ourselves to save the innocents. Is that not what you do?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Here was an enemy offering to make the same impossible choice that humans made every day, to bear the moral weight of terrible decisions for the sake of others. Nari spoke up quietly. "Admiral, we could separate them. Keep the collective beings contained while we attempt to rehabilitate the individuals. It would be risky, but it would be the right thing to do," Jinne finished. She looked around the command center at her officers. "The question is whether we can afford to do the right thing when the cost might be the safety of the entire galaxy." Yunji realized she was witnessing something that no other species had ever seen. She was watching humans struggle with the weight of their own power, trying to find a balance between necessary brutality and impossible mercy. "What do you decide?" she asked. Ginny was quiet for a long time. Outside, the destruction of the Hive fleet continued. Inside the command center, the fate of thousands of beings hung on the decision of one human admiral. "We try," Jinne said finally. "God help us all, we try to find another way." The decision would change everything, but Yunji understood now why the galaxy both feared and needed humanity. They were the only species strong enough to make impossible choices, and compassionate enough to try to make them correctly. 6 months after the war ended, Kyung-soo stood in the rebuilt crystal gardens of Valani Prime, trying to understand what his people had become. The city was more beautiful now than it had ever been before. Human engineers had helped them grow their crystal structures in new patterns that sang with harmonies they had never heard. But beauty came with a price, and that price was the knowledge of what they owed to the most feared species in the galaxy. "The philosophers are meeting again today," Yuna said as she joined him in the garden. As their new communications director, she maintained contact with dozens of galactic civilizations. Most were still trying to understand what humanity had done. "What are they discussing this time?" Kyung-soo asked. "The same question we have been asking for months. Are humans saviors or destroyers? Can a species be both?" Kyung-soo looked toward the human settlement that had been built on the outskirts of their main city. 3,000 human personnel had remained after the war, led by Colonel Min-ho. They said they were there to protect Valani space from future threats. But everyone knew the real reason. Humans never trusted anyone else to guard what they had saved. The settlement was a study in contradictions. It contained some of the most destructive weapons ever created, devices that could crack planets and sterilize star systems. But it also contained schools where human children played with young Valani, learning crystal harmonics as a second language. "Young Min wants to see you," Yuna continued. "She has news from the galactic community." Young Min was the human diplomatic representative, one of the few people who could speak to other species without causing panic. She had been working for months to explain humanity's actions to civilizations that still could not understand them. Kyung-soo found her in the communication center, reviewing reports from across the galaxy. She looked tired. Diplomatic work with frightened species was exhausting. "How are our neighbors responding?" he asked. Young Min gestured to her displays showing dozens of different star systems. "Mixed reactions. The Trade Federation wants to establish commerce with us now that you have human protection. The Ethereal Confederation is still debating whether to classify humans as a beneficial or hostile species." "And the others?" "The Machine Collective has calculated that human protection makes Valani space the safest region in the galaxy. They are requesting permission to establish a research station here." Young Min paused. The psionic assembly is still too afraid to respond to our communications at all. Kyung-soo was not surprised. Fear was the most common reaction to humanity's intervention, but there was something else in Young Min's expression. What else? He asked. We have been receiving distress calls, she admitted. 17 different systems in the past month. Pirates, slavers, invasive species. They are all asking for human intervention. And Admiral Jinnae is reviewing the requests. We cannot respond to all of them, but we cannot ignore them either. Kyung-soo understood the problem. Humans had demonstrated that they would risk everything to help those who could not help themselves. Now every desperate civilization in the galaxy was calling for aid, but human resources were limited, and their methods came with moral costs that most species could not accept. Their conversation was interrupted by Sun-hee, one of the most remarkable beings in the settlement. She had been part of the Hive Collective, converted against her will from a peaceful agricultural species. The humans had successfully separated her from the collective consciousness and helped her remember who she had been before. Kyung-soo, she said in her careful, precise voice, the rehabilitation program has achieved another success. 2 more Hive individuals have recovered their original memories. The rehabilitation program was perhaps the most extraordinary thing humans had accomplished. Instead of simply destroying all Hive creatures, they had developed ways to free individual consciousnesses from the collective. It was slow, dangerous work that required constant monitoring to prevent the collective from reasserting control. How many have been saved? Kyung-soo asked. 437 individuals from 17 different original species, Sun-hee replied. They are being relocated to refugee worlds throughout the galaxy. But Kyung-soo knew the other number too. 6,000 Hive creatures had been too integrated with the collective to save. They had been dealt with. The humans did not speak about what had happened to them, but everyone understood. The moral complexity of humanity's solution still kept Kyung-soo awake at night. In the human settlement, Colonel Minho was dealing with his own moral complexities. He stood in his command center, reviewing intelligence reports about new threats emerging in nearby systems. His aide, Lieutenant Hee Young, approached with the latest batch of distress calls. Sir, we have 3 new requests for intervention. A slaver fleet is operating in the outer reach. Some kind of plague ship is threatening the Gentle Collective, and there are reports of another Hive splinter group in the Twilight sector. Minho studied each report carefully. Every situation required different resources, different tactics, different moral calculations. The slaver fleet could be dealt with quickly, but would require violating several species' territorial claims. The plague ship needed immediate response but might require destroying refugee vessels to prevent contamination. The Hive Splinter group was the most dangerous but also offered the possibility of saving more converted individuals. Recommendations? He asked. We can handle 1 major operation and 2 minor ones with current resources, Hee Young replied. But Admiral Jinnae has made it clear that we cannot commit to protecting the entire galaxy. Then we choose, Minho said quietly. And we live with the consequences of not choosing the others. This was the burden humans carried. Every decision to help one species meant ignoring others. Every moral choice came with the knowledge that alternatives might have saved more lives. As evening came to Volani Prime, the Crystal Gardens began their nightly song. The harmonies were different now, incorporating new frequencies that human artists had suggested. The result was more complex and more beautiful than anything the Volani had created before. Kyung-soo listened to the music and thought about the price of salvation. His people were alive, safe, and growing in ways they had never imagined. But they were alive because humans had been willing to make choices that other species could not make. He looked toward the human settlement, where lights were coming on in windows. Human families were having dinner, human children were playing games, human scientists were working on projects that might save the next species that called for help. The galaxy feared these beings because they could not understand them. Humans were the only species that combined the capacity for unlimited violence with the willingness to sacrifice for others. They would burn down star systems to protect innocent life, then spend decades rebuilding what they had destroyed. In the communications center, a new distress signal arrived. Another desperate species, another impossible situation, another choice that would keep human commanders awake at night. But Kyung-soo knew that somewhere in the galaxy, human ships were already changing course. They would answer the call as they always did. They would make the hard choices, bear the moral weight, and live with the consequences, because that was what humans did. They were the galaxy's protector of last resort, the species others called when there was no other option, and they always answered. The crystal song continued through the night, harmonies of survival and gratitude mixing with the knowledge that sometimes salvation came with teeth and claws and the willingness to use them. The humans had taught the galaxy a terrible truth. Sometimes the most frightening protector was the only one strong enough to actually protect. In the end, the Villani had not just been saved. They had been shown what it meant to make impossible choices for the sake of others. It was a lesson that would change them forever, just as it had changed every species that humanity had ever helped. The price of salvation was understanding that someone had to be willing to pay it. And in this galaxy, that someone was always human.